Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this meeting of the Council of the Town of Oakville. I invite you to rise and join Council in O Canada. Thank you. Please be seated. I will now lead us in our opening prayer, microphone permitting, and followed by our moment of silent reflection, and then we'll begin the meeting. God, grant us understanding and patience that justice, truth, and honesty may be evident in our decisions. Make us mindful of the needs of the people throughout the wider community. And help us govern with all of Oakville in mind, and create in us a desire for progress and responsible action. We ask this in your name. Amen. And please join us now in a moment of silent reflection. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Perhaps we should have another prayer for microphones without feedback. Oh, that's better. Madam Clerk, do we have any regrets for tonight's meeting?
No, Mr. Mayor, we do not.
Thank you. Then, Council, do we have any declarations of pecuniary interest? Seeing none. Councillor Khan.
I have a declaration of pecuniary interest with respect to ASC item, I think it's item 1.
Thank you. That is in fact recorded in the agenda, so thank you very much for that, Councillor Khan. All right, Council, you have before you the minutes of the previous council meetings from February 7th and Valentine's Day, February 14th. And how do you wish to deal with the minutes? Councillor Dudek. Councillor Dudek moves approval. Is there a seconder? Councillor Robinson?
I just wanted to remind the clerk that I was here on Valentine's Day night P&D meeting, but I'm not shown to be in the
Thank you for the correction. We'll update that. And were you also seconding them, subject to that amendment?
Sure.
Thank you. Then the minutes as amended or corrected are before you. All in favor? Opposed, if any? They're adopted. We have no public presentations tonight, but we do have a number of delegations. And I would ask the delegates to try to be mindful of Council's procedural law, which asks delegations who have presented at committee to bring only new information if they delegate again at Council. And with that, Madam Clerk, would you recognize the first delegation?
The first delegation is Mike Lansdowne, the Association of Oakville Harbor Stakeholders regarding emergency services, tow wharf user fees, which is item 3 of the Community Services Committee meeting of February 15th.
I need technical assistance, please, Your Worship.
Will, it's right behind you. And welcome, and council is looking forward to your new information.
It's not my present.
Oh.
Okay, this one, right? Yep. Okay. Gracias. No problem.
Thank you.
Good evening, Your Worship, members of council, members of staff, ladies and gentlemen. For the record, my name is Mike Lansdowne, and I'm speaking to you this evening on behalf of the Association of Oakville Stakeholders. I'm addressing item 3 of the minutes of the Community Service Committee meeting of 15th of February, namely the emergency services toll-off user fees, which is before council for approval this evening. Firstly, we wish to reiterate the continued support of AOHS for the search and rescue services provided by toll-off. We were given to understand that perhaps some misunderstanding arose at the CSC meeting last week, and therefore we sent an email with our CSC presentation attached to the mayor, members of council, and staff to confirm our position. Voters are fully aware of the serious life-threatening hazards that can occur on the open and often very cold waters of Lake Ontario. On these occasions, we and all boaters are very grateful to have the assistance of tow wharfs nearby with their well-equipped vessel and well-trained crew. Secondly, we endorse Councillor Elgar's motion to adopt the staff recommendation of option D to fund tow wharf operating costs for the 2011 harbour's budget. Given that the 2011 budget process is well underway, we feel it would be unrealistic at this time to suggest exploring alternative funding formulae for the 2011 harbour's budget. Thirdly, however, we do wish to suggest to Council reconsider the recommendation that we made to the Community Services Committee last week, namely that Council requests staff to work with tow wharf, AOHS, and with the Oakville Harbours Advisory Committee, OHAC, to explore an alternate funding formula for tow wharf in time for the 2012 budget process. There are several reasons for this request. The first one is, from the quick survey we have made of other tow wharf sister units of the Canadian Coast Guard Auxiliary in our area, for example, Pickering, Hamilton Beach, Grimsby, we have determined that they all have revenue streams derived from a blend of charitable donations, commercial sponsorship, and public municipal funding. In fact, the Canadian Coast Guard Auxiliary's own website officially endorses both charitable donations and commercial sponsorship. We believe the community makeup of Oakville would respond very positively to such an approach and the opportunity afforded. Secondly, tow wharf's own call-out logs also document services to canoes and kayaks, and so Oakville's 2 canoe clubs should be invited to participate in supporting tow wharf as well. Thirdly, the same call-out logs record that tow wharf often intervenes to rescue exhausted swimmers and people falling off the piers. One case in 2008 earned tow wharf members a nomination for a Citizens Recognition Award from the Halton Regional Police. This suggests that perhaps a municipal contribution to recognize these harbour-related services should also be considered in the funding formula. Fourthly, as well as addressing tow wharf's operating costs, we suggest it would also be prudent to review the reserve funding arrangement for the eventual future replacement of the tow wharf vessel. We believe this should also be studied to ensure that the amount of the annual amortization is adequate to the eventual needs and that the source of the funding remains appropriate. We respectfully submit that over the last 9 months, AOHS has demonstrated a successful, cooperative working relationship with staff in identifying opportunities for improvement in the Hampson Report. Therefore, we firmly believe that AOHS has the capacity to also work collaboratively with staff, with tow wharf and OHAC to explore opportunities for designing a more innovative and equitable funding model rather than ascribing all costs to the Oakville boaters. Therefore, through the chair, we invite and encourage a member of council to move the following amendment to item 3 in the CLC minutes before you. Namely, that staff is requested to work with TOWOLF, the Oakville Harbors Advisory Committee, and the Association of Oakville Harbor Stakeholders to explore alternative funding arrangements for TOWOLF in sufficient time for council to consider implementation for the 2012 budget process. Those are my comments, Your Worship, and if council have any questions, I would naturally be happy to answer them.
Thank you very much for your information, Mr. Lansdowne. Thank you, sir. Madam Clerk, would you please call the next delegation?
The next delegation is Peter Fairweather, again regarding the emergency service tow wharf user fees, item 3 of the Community Services Committee agenda.
Welcome, Mr. Fairweather. Council looks forward to your information.
I hope this is the right forum for this. I sat at the meeting last week, and as an individual, I sat as a member of TWARF. Tonight I come here as a ratepayer in Oakville and volunteer to speak on my opinion on the charges that are going to take place. My name is Peter Fairweather, and I come to you tonight to speak as a longtime resident, ratepayer, and volunteer in the town of Oakville. And I would go as far as to say a stakeholder and a lifelong boater. I've come to you tonight to speak on what I consider my view on TWARF, and to be upfront, I am a member of this unit. I'm not going into details of the founding and anything else from previous years. I've lived and played in Oakville all my life, and my greatest pleasure with this town has always been the water. I've seen firsthand throughout my life how TWARF has been a key player in a marine emergency response capacity. At present, TWARF is a very formidable marine rescue unit on the shores of Lake Ontario, and in my opinion, one of the best in the Central Arctic region. A truly long-standing brand that is uniquely Oakville. The wide spectrum of individuals that support TWARF comes from all walks of life: doctors, engineers, financial, professional trades, rescue services, and the average Joe. We're all dedicated to one thing: the safety and well-being of all individuals on the water in our geographical area and outside if need be. TWARF covers roughly 100 to 120 square miles of water. This may not sound like much, but I can assure you at a speed of 5 knots in 10-foot waves, this is no easy thing to do, running surge patterns in all directions. Most of the times that we get called out for these taskings, the conditions are generally not favorable. I believe for the money that the town directs per year to TWARF is money well spent, good branding, good PR, and support for a long-standing service. Are we an essential service? I personally believe we are. I can be at the boat in the middle of the night from a dead sleep in 10 minutes and with another 5 minutes be at full power with a crew ready to go. On a monetary note, to give you an idea of worth, at my job, my employer bills me out at $125 an hour as a millwright. I stand 28 to 30 regular crews per year at 4 hours a night. This works out to $14,000. Committee meetings that I stand, 80 a year, 3 hours a crack, $125 an hour works out to another $3,000. Emergency call out in the middle of the night, now my price goes up by my employer to 180 hours. 3 of those a year at 8 hours of tasking, $4,320. General helping out around the building, I figure 24 hours a year at $125 an hour, $3,000. And mechanical fixing the boat, which I'm very active in, I figure last year about 125 hours on the boat at 125 hours. That works out to $15,625. My total for the year worked out to about $40,000. I'm not unique. There are a lot of people that bill out at a much higher rate than I do in real life. Everybody on the TWARF does a minimum 28 crews a year. Let's assume they all do shifts and we make the billing an even $50. That takes into account all your benefits and whatnot. 50 times 28 times 4 times 80 works out to an amount of $448,000. This is assuming that it's just crewing and nothing else that goes on with building, maintenance, mechanical, community relations, PR, boating safety. Now, as a boater, I truly believe that option A is what it should be because I think TWRF is definitely a long-standing and branded service in Oakville and historically proven as viable, cost-effective service. I'd be happy with option D for a year, but I think for the 2012 season, it should go to A, and I believe that Oakville should foot the bill for TWRF. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your information, Mr. Fairweather. Madam Clerk, the next delegation.
Is David Ernst, again regarding emergency services, tow wharf user fees, item 3 of the Community Services Committee agenda.
Mr. Ernst,
David Ernst.
going once, going twice.
Okay, the next delegation listed has withdrawn, so the final delegation would be Mark Dowington, Commander of Tow Wharf, regarding emergency services, tow wharf user fees, item 3 of the Community Services Committee meeting of February 15th.
Mr. Dillington, welcome. Before I get you started, let me see if I can assist a member of the audience who appears to be enjoying our audio levels here. Mr. Glynn, can you hear all right? No, sir. What was it you couldn't hear?
Most of it.
We were calling Mr. Ernst with no result. Our technical help is beetling to the back. Testing 1, 2. Actually, it's your mic he was complaining.
When both of them are on.
Oh, all right. Well, testing 1, 2, 3. Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing. I have no idea. Did you get an improvement?
Yes.
You did. Great. Super. And we're on the edge of feedback. This will be fun. Mr. Dillington.
Good evening,
Thank
Mayor
you for
Burton.
making yourself available. We look forward to your information.
Good evening, Mayor Burton, members of council, and ladies and gentlemen. It appears as a recurring theme that when Tow Wharf presents to council, there's technical difficulties. My name is Mark Darlington, and I am the current serving commander of Tow Wharf. I'm also the Canadian Coast Guard Auxiliary Director responsible for this area. I did not think I would be standing here today having to defend Tow Wharf's funding of $32,500 to ensure Tow Wharf is able to continue to provide an emergency service in the future. Tow Wharf is an emergency service founded by the late Fred Oliver in 1954 with the dual purpose of providing a marine search and rescue service and promoting marine safety through public education and pleasure craft courtesy checks. Tow Wharf is an all-volunteer organisation made up of over 90 members with crews on station for 40 hours each week and on call 24/7 at all other times during the boating season. Members come from all walks of life, including past and serving members of the military and emergency service personnel. These volunteers give up a substantial amount of their family time to provide the current level of service to the boating public. Unfortunately, the public may not be aware of the considerable number of additional volunteer hours required to maintain the service of rescue boat and other behind-the-scenes activities. The boat has to be maintained to a very high standard to ensure we are ready for service at all times, and this comes at a cost in time, money, and equipment. The current level of funding has been in place for a number of years, and Tow Wharf has not received an increase over the same period. In fact, if you take into account inflation, hydro costs, and the current price of fuel, it is clear that the value of this funding has decreased significantly over time. Every year the Tow Wharf executive goes through a budget process, and every year we are cutting funding in some areas to ensure the boat is kept to the current high standard. It has even got to the point where members have to purchase their own uniforms, as we do not have the funding to provide them. There have been comments made that the number of tasking each year is decreasing. This is untrue. The number of taskings continues to fluctuate, and seasonal weather plays a big part in this. As a result, Tow Wharf completes on average 30 to 40 rescues each boating season. And with the increase in residents in Oakville and Halton region, I predict an increase in boating traffic and taskings in the coming years. Some have indicated that TOWOF should be funded by an alternative means such as charitable donations. The RNLI, the Royal National Lifeboat Institution in the United Kingdom, is funded this way. It has over 40,000 volunteers and full-time staff behind the scenes working to raise money to ensure sufficient funds is available to maintain the service. And just an aside to that, one rescue vessel in the United Kingdom cost 2.6 million sterling, just to give you a sort of an idea of what the vessels cost there. Also, the majority of boaters in the UK are prepared to pay nearly $50 per year to be members of the organisation. And the general public are very generous in funding the Royal National Lifeboat Institution. TOWOF is very good value for money. When you consider what it costs to run and equip this organisation with full-time staff, $32,500 will not even cover the cost of one full-time employee. The current funding of $32,500 enables TOWOF to maintain its current level of service for the time being, and enables the volunteers to focus on the task at hand and not where the next dollar is coming from. Any change to the funding of TOWOF will significantly impact our ability to provide the current level of service. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your information. All right. That brings us, Council, to our standing committee reports. And you have before you the 2011 Budget Committee report, the Community Services Committee report, and the Administrative Services Committee report, which will split into two, everything except item 1 and item 1. Councillor Adams.
I'll move all of them.
Thank you. I need a seconder. Councillor Johnston. And now we're going to hold back the vote on Administrative Services Committee report item 1 because of Councillor Khan's conflict, and he's free to vote on the first motion. All in favor? Opposed, if any? The reports are adopted. And now Councillor Khan will not participate in the vote on item 1 from the ASC. All in favor? Opposed? That too is adopted. So now, Council, that brings us to your consent item, the additional seawall repair in the Oakville Harbor. How do you wish to deal with this? Councillor Johnston. Councillor Johnston moves it. Councillor Khan seconds it. All in favor? Opposed? That is consented to. That brings us to our first discussion item, which is the Oakville Hydro proposed Halton Utilities Group. And we have a report from the Commissioner of Corporate Services. And Commissioner Lalonde, Councillor Demoff.
I don't know what kind of point this is, but I don't think the people in the audience know what we've just passed.
Oh, the recommendations from the Community Services Committee were adopted by Council with that vote.
So the recommendation that we passed at Community Services, which was option D, has now been passed by Council.
Yes, as they expected, or as I understood them to expect. Commissioner Lalonde.
Thank you, Your Worship. We have a number of people here from Oakville Hydro to make a presentation to Council tonight. The group is led by Rob Lister, CEO of Oakville Hydro. I'd like to introduce him, and he in turn will introduce some of the other speakers in the presentation tonight.
Thank you, Commissioner. President Lister.
Thank you, Gordon. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. My name is Rob Lister, President and CEO of Oakville Hydro Corporation. Oakville Hydro is pleased to be here this evening for a number of reasons. The first is to seek shareholder approval to participate in a proposed corporate entity with the Halton Utilities Group, and we have a brief presentation to provide the background and plans for this business venture. The second reason is to provide council with an update on some of the business activities of Oakville Hydro as part of a quarterly update to council that we would like to provide. With these updates, we intend to keep council abreast of current initiatives at Oakville Hydro and the progress on key projects. Today, there are 4 initiatives, actually. I need to put something on the screen here. Down here. Oh, it's not the one.
So just close it over here. Yes. There you go.
Okay, thanks. Today, there are 4 initiatives we are presenting on. The Halton Utilities Group, known as HUG, the IES project, the Integrated Energy System for the new hospital, our new Glenorchy High Voltage Transformer Station, and an update on the implementation of time of use rates for electricity customers. I would like to acknowledge the Chair of Oakville Hydro Corporation, Mr. Gary Burkett, who is attending with us tonight. Gary, raise your hand there. Also, members of my staff are here this evening and will be presenting the topics. Scott Moody, Vice President of Renewable Generation and Energy Services. Mike Brown, VP of Engineering and Operations. And Leslie Gallinger, VP of Corporate and Regulatory Affairs. Now, as a refresher, Oakville Hydro Electricity Distribution, Inc., the regulated subsidiary of Oakville Hydro Corporation, provides electricity and energy conservation solutions to over 63,000 customers in Oakville. This is our main business. Oakville Hydro Energy Services, Inc. operates a number of ventures, including the landfill gas recovery business at the region's landfill site, the new integrated energy system for the new hospital, various energy services including Golden Horseshoe metering systems, water heater rentals, and proposed solar energy installations. Elcon is our civil construction business that provides underground utility construction services and locate services. At this point, I'd like Scott Moody to come forward and speak to the Halton Utilities Group proposal. Scott? Thanks.
Good evening, Mayor Burton, councilors, ladies and gentlemen. Over the past year, we at Oakville Hydro have been working with the other 4 Halton utilities, that being Burlington, Milton, Halton Hills, with the region of Halton on identifying green renewable projects. The region is looking to the Halton Utilities Group, as we call ourselves, or HUG, to progress a number of renewable energy projects. The first project slated for development is a solar generating system on top of the regional headquarters on Bronte in Oakville. So what is HUG? Halton Utilities Group will be a limited partnership, an LP partnership, held equally between the 4 utilities. A master agreement will govern the partnership between the 4 utilities and the manner in which each project is approached. HUG is also going to be the vehicle in which the 4 utilities carry out all green energy projects for the region of Halton. So why now? We have a project that's 120 kilowatts of solar generating capacity that will sit atop the regional building on Bronte. HUG will apply for a feed-in tariff contract with the Ontario Power Authority under the Green Energy Act. The feed-in tariff contract will have to be in HUG's name, and we are looking to install in 2011 and generate our first kilowatts by the end of the year. Thank you, Mayor Burton and Town Council. Are there any questions?
Thank you very much. Councillor Ilger.
What's the rate you're going to get? Are you at the 80 cents, the 62, or the 40?
We'll be at 44 cents for the rooftop. It's a fit contract, so it's not a microfit. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you very much, Mr. Moody.
Yeah.
Mr. Lister?
Council for the request. That's one, Council, before we go on to the presentation. Would that be appropriate? Go finish,
Okay.
go through? Okay. All right.
Sure, I'll continue.
Councillor Khan.
Just going back to the 120 kilowatts, can you just put it in perspective? How many homes are we looking at that could satisfy?
It depends. I mean, depending on the size of the house, of course, and but a typical house would be looking at about 36 to 40 homes.
Supplemental to that, with the 44 cents coming back, what's the payback period on a project like this? And what's the cost of the project?
Well, we have budgeted estimates. Of course, we haven't gone out for a tender yet. But we're hoping to get to about $4, $5 a watt, which would take the project to about $650,000 roughly. I mean, I really shouldn't be discussing estimates, but. Sure. Sure, sure.
Thank you, Councillor. Mr. Moody, do you have something else?
Yes, so I'd like to go on with the presentation on the IES project, if I may.
All right.
As most of you are aware, OHESI has been working with Halton Healthcare Services since 2008 on developing an integrated energy system, or also, as it's commonly known, district energy, to service the thermal, energy, and standby power needs of the Oakville Hospital. The site is located at the northeast corner of future Burnham Thorpe and 3rd Line. The hospital and the IES will be connected via underground road utility ducts. And for future North Oakville energy customers, services will extend along roadways within the municipal utility corridors. The 3 qualified proponents are currently working on final design presentations for both the IES and the hospital. OHESI is working very closely with the Ontario Power Authority towards a power purchase agreement under the newly announced Clean Energy Standard Offer program. And we are also continuing to work with all stakeholders to finalize all the required project agreements. So, milestones and next steps. The request for proposals actually closes the end of this month, February. So we will be evaluating the bids during the months of March and April. A preferred proponent will be selected in May of 2011. We will reach commercial close, or at least it's scheduled for August of 2011. And if all goes to schedule, we will see shovels in the ground in the fall of this year. Are there any questions?
Councillor Elgar.
Thank you. I'm glad you're coming to speak to this tonight because I've had a few emails, and I think I've sent one to Mr. Lister recently regarding its term as a power plant. And, you know, once people hear power plant, they get nervous. And could you maybe explain a little bit more of the size of this compared to the natural gas power plant that they were talking about putting down at Ford? I would appreciate it, and also to confirm that actually this plant will meet the air quality guidelines that we have produced in Oakville. So if you could kind of give us a little more, flesh this out a little bit further, keep everybody at peace.
Through you, Your Worship. The power plant that was proposed for Oakville was in the neighborhood of 900 megawatts. The IES integrated energy system is going to be less than 10 megawatts. So, roughly, 1% of what was proposed. It's not a power plant in the truest sense of the word or of the definition. It actually is a district energy. So, we are actually producing thermal energy, steam, hot water, chilled water for heating and cooling of buildings. We are not going to be generating or burning fossil fuels solely for the generation of electricity. So for future customers, they will be looking to us less for electrical generation and more for thermal generation. And to answer the latter part of your question, the bylaw, of course, in the design, it is a requirement that all the proponents meet and comply with the existing bylaw for within Oakville for the air emissions.
I appreciate that. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Councillor Knoll.
Your Worship, do you mind, can we just take one step back to the HUG proposal for a second? I have a couple questions on that, since the gentleman is still with us. Is that okay?
Of course.
Thank you. Going back to the HUG proposal, I apologize for going backwards here. What is the contribution that Oakville Hydro will be making to the partnership?
25%.
What does that equal in dollars and cents? Can you disclose that at this in an open session?
It's not that I can't disclose it, it's not a firm bid yet. So first step is to... let me just sort of stop you there for a second. So the contribution is exclusively the cost
25% of the cost of the Halton Region project. There's no additional funding going into the HUG partnership at this point?
That's correct.
So it's a project-by-project basis, and it'll be funded on that basis?
Exactly.
Okay. Do you have a rough guesstimate? I know it hasn't been, I know when we were talking about the hospital, they always said plus or minus 15%. Can you give me a plus or minus 15%?
$175,000
As our contribution?
as our contribution.
Okay. And so I assume we're just financing that internally. It's a relatively, in the grand scheme of the corporation, a minor financing project?
That is the plan to date, yes.
Okay, and you responded to a question from Councillor Elgar with respect to payback. Have you contemplated an adjustment or a change in policy with respect to the energy contracts from the province? Or is there some sort of long-term locked-in ability to be able to secure those kind of rates?
Well, again, through you, Your Worship, one of the reasons why we want to establish the corporation now and get our application in so that we can secure the contract, we firmly believe that once we've secured the contract, that that price that we're relying on for the funding of the project will be good for the next 20 years. So it's a 20-year contract, and that's what we're counting on.
And just in terms of comparables, what was the annual power generation estimates on with that particular plant again?
Well, it's 120 kilowatts, and I don't have the exact number here, but I can certainly get you that.
Do you know, I know the way the system works is it gets sold back onto the grid, so it doesn't go directly into the building, but just for the sake of comparisons and of general interest sake, what would a complex like the Halton Region facility consume in the course of a year? I know it's not directly related, but I think it's of interest, so.
Right. Sorry, I don't have those numbers. Yes, I can get back to you on that, yes.
And last question is, you talked about seeking grants. Was there some funding, some federal government or provincial government funding? No. So I misheard that. You were obviously referring to the contract, I guess.
The OPA fit contract.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you very much, Your Worship, and thank you to the delegation.
Thank you, Councillor Knoll. And Councillor Dimmoff.
Just out of curiosity, when you had that, it was on HUG as well, when you had that org chart up, it showed HUG as a 0.5% owner of a limited partnership. I'm just wondering why it's structured that way, why the 4 utility groups are not the direct owners of, was that in there?
So the question is why
So the limited partnership is owned 24.95% by the 4 utilities, and then HUG itself is an owner of the limited partner. And I'm just wondering why HUG isn't the limited partner and the ownership is 25% each.
The legal structure as proposed is what was recommended by our legal advisors. The general partnership is again owned by the 4 utilities as well. So the GP has to own a very nominal amount, in this case 0.2%, for this legal structure to work.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Mr. Moody. Mr. Brown, welcome. Council looks forward to the news of your success with the transformer station.
Thank you, Mayor Burton, and honorable councilors. Thanks for the opportunity to speak in front of you tonight on the status of the Glenorchy Municipal Transformer Station. I've been before, or we've been before council on several occasions associated with this particular facility. Sorry. Yeah, no kidding. No, back one. Yeah, in September 2009, with the initial project to put in the transformer station, and then in June 2010 with the land acquisition. We're currently in construction phase. The Oakville Hydro 153 megawatt transformer station is located at the northwest corner of Highway 407 and the 6th line. Look at a transformer station as a transformation demarcation point. You have the 230 kV transmission grid going east-west. The station itself takes it and transforms that power from 230 kV down to 27.6, which is our distributing operating voltage. So this is a demarcation point. Traditionally, these are owned by Hydro One. In this particular case, we have chosen as part of the project to build, own, and operate this station. It'll provide additional service capacity to North Oakville and the associated development areas. We've officially named it Glenorchy Municipal Transformer Station because of the fact of its close proximity to the recent conservation area. The map that you have in front of you just gives you an orientation. It's in north central. We have 4 Hydro One transformer stations that currently serve the town of Oakville. As I mentioned before, the site is under construction right now. The control building is in place. It's at, I would say, 95% completion. We're doing inside conditioning as we speak. The overhead connection to the Hydro One transmission grid is complete. It just needs actual physical connection and activation. The pole line construction is underway on 6th line as well as on Burnhamthorpe Road. And we're planning the Highway 407 crossing in April. The equipment integration, we've acquired the equipment. We now must bring the equipment to site, complete the integration and commissioning. We've got that scheduled for May. And our in-service date is planned for the end of June, and we also plan to, as we've highlighted here, have an official ribbon-cutting ceremony. This is a bit of a bird's-eye view. It gives you a view of the site. The top one on the left is looking east, the control building, and some of the hardware in place as part of the connections. And the second one below is looking south towards Highway 407. So that's the current status on the project.
Thank you very much, Mr. Brown. Are there questions for Councillor Knoll? Mr. Brown, I wonder if you could...
Can you switch back to the map for a second, please?
By all means.
So the power station is located, it's where the big blue circle is, right?
Yeah, it's the kind of the green dot. Just
the green dot in the
inside.
blue circle. And so, I'm sorry that my eyes aren't better. What are the...
The 4 dots, Councillor Knoll, that are Palermo, Trafalgar, Bronte, and in the southeast corner, Oakville. Those are the 4 existing Hydro One transformer stations that actually serve Oakville.
And they're owned by Hydro One?
That's correct.
And so you mentioned that most stations are owned by Hydro One. In fact, they are in this particular
In the province,
case.
that's correct.
What is the benefit to the ratepayers of Oakville Hydro to actually own the station?
Well, one of the things that we, back in September of 2009, we highlighted the fact that in our view, we could build this faster and more economically than Hydro One's proposal to us, plus the additional capabilities of managing and operating the system and having the resources in-house. So there were several factors, but it's actually, to this date, has borne correct.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Knoll. Councillor Cohen.
I recall one of the transfer stations was derated. And which one was that?
It's actually Oakville TS. It's in the southeast corner. We had transformer derating conditions put in place on both of those transformers by Hydro One probably about 4 years ago, actually. Yes.
What's the maximum output on that, and what in comparison to the new one that we're building?
It would be somewhat less than that in essence. They're just actually going through the replacement of that particular transformer in the next month. So I'm going to say this one is 153 megawatts. That's probably in the 120 megawatt category. And it's a shared facility between ourselves, between serving Oakville and the city of Mississauga.
But this one, will this one be shared at all with Milton?
It's currently a distribution asset for the town of Oakville. In future, if there's a requirement that Milton may have, there could be opportunities for setting up service rates where we would actually provide them as a service customer. That's a possibility. Thank you.
Mr. Green.
Through you, Mayor Burton. At the time, actually, this project was being presented to council. I was actually the acting CEO of Oakville Hydro. And in response to the council's question about why did Oakville Hydro undertake the work rather than Ontario Hydro, and as our speaker mentioned, one of the aspects was certainly cost, a much higher cost. One of the other, and perhaps the most compelling from my point of view, and when we did the business case, was with Ontario Hydro, you had to guarantee a certain cash flow. So all the risk, they would build it, and the local utility would actually take all the risk in terms of the cash flow. So whether or not the amount of hydro that was projected was used, it was our risk. So really, we built it for lower, and all the risk was ours anyways. We've taken that as part of the project. So it was really a risk analysis that caused us to move away from Ontario Hydro.
Councillor Knoll.
And just a supplemental question to that. So, I mean, the burning question on the minds of the general public, the taxpayers, would be, is there any additional net cost to Oakville ratepayers for this business scenario over what we would have encountered had we gone the traditional route? Or is there net savings?
Oh, absolute net savings.
Thank you. I just wanted that.
In terms of construction and long-term operating.
I just wanted to get that on the record.
And the same risk.
Okay, thank you.
Very good point.
Thank you very much, Mr. Green and Mr. Knoll and Mr. Brown. And welcome, Ms. Gallinger. We look forward to your information on time of use, even if we may not look too forward to time of use.
Yes, thank you very much, Mayor Burton, members of council. I do have the dubious honor of presenting about time of use rates tonight, and hopefully I can help make some sense of it and give you some information on how we're helping our customers and the residents of Oakville understand and operate under the new principles. So as you're already aware, the province, through the OEB, mandated that all local utilities across the province would install smart meters by the end of 2010 and begin the billing of all customers under time of use rates in early 2011. Time of use rates are prices that vary by the time of use. So basically the time of day during the weekdays and by the day of the week, and also by the season, summer versus winter. We have completed all except a very small handful of installations of smart meters for all of our residential and small commercial customers, and we're beginning this month to roll out the communication of the time of use rates to those customers. So our public work has begun with our website and with some mail-outs of postcards and in-bill information. We'll actually begin using time of use rates on April 15th. The first bills under time of use rates will be in customers' hands on June 15th, and we will be cycling through our billing cycle of 60 days. So every customer will have seen their full bill on time of use rates by the 15th of August. And our communication strategy will continue throughout that period to help customers understand the new billing structure. So the province in its long-term energy policy has stated that the goal of time of use rates is to encourage customers to shift their electricity to off-peak times to reduce the overall strain on the electricity system. The province has also suggested that by helping make customers sensitive to the differing costs of electricity when they use it, this will promote conservation behavior. So when electricity is high, customers will be paying a high price, and so hopefully that will spur the kind of conservation thinking and behavior that the province is trying to encourage. The schedules themselves, the OEB sets the schedule for time of use rates. They set it twice a year in May and November. The wheels represent the different seasonal values. So the first one, although you can't really see the top word, is actually the summer wheel. So you see we have a peak in the summer that occurs between 11 and 5, mid-peak in the shoulder periods, and then off-peak overnight. In the winter, our peaks are actually in the morning and the evening when we're home and getting ready for work and home to have our dinner. Weekends and statutory holidays are off-peak at all times. Our communications campaign, the goal of our communications campaign is to help customers, not to help them like it, because nobody's going to love this strategy, but basically to help them become knowledgeable and understand how they can impact and influence their electricity bill with their behaviors at home through shifting consumption. So the campaign has several tools. We're using bill inserts, we're using postcards, we're using our web extensively. We did some early research, and our customers told us that 70 to 75% of them would go to our website first for information. So we're using that as a hub of communication. We're also out in the community at several outreach events over the coming months, things like Earth Hour at the malls, Midnight Madness, and any other community-based events that we can find table and audience at. So we're also preparing our staff with detailed Q&A so they can help customers as they call in, as they see their first bill, so they understand what's going on with that bill as well. Can I answer any questions? Oh.
Yes, as a matter of fact, Councillor Elger will start you off.
Thank you very much for the information.
You're welcome.
Now, I think we need a little bit more, though. Can you tell me, what are we paying today in our rates on a per kilowatt hour?
So,
I'd like to start there, and then you wheel me through it to off-peak, mid-peak, and peak, what I'm going to be paying, that's the only thing I believe will determine the behavior. So
Okay.
if you could roll us through that.
Sure, certainly. The prices I'm going to talk about are for the commodity piece of your bill only. Your service charge to Oakville Hydro, the fixed charge that you pay for the infrastructure, will not change under time of use or standard prices. So right now, a customer who's on RPP, which is the regulated price plan, the OEB's set rates, are paying in the winter 6.4 cents for the first 1,000 kilowatt hours they use in a month, and 7.4 cents for anything over and above 1,000 kilowatt hours in that month. So that's today, and of course, if they're with a retailer, that's a whole other discussion. So the current time of use tiers, off-peak is 5.1 cents. Oh, sorry, we're 5.1 for off-peak. Mid-peak is 8.1 cents per kilowatt hour. And on-peak is 9.9 cents per kilowatt hour. So those are the winter rates. Those will be reset on May 1st.
The summer rates?
I don't have the summer rates. They're not public until just before the May 1st rollout. So what the Energy Board does is basically look at the forecast for power consumption for the summer, and they look at any variances they have for the prior period, and they roll those into the new rates, which will be effective May 1st to October 31st.
And can you take me back to your time of day usage
Yep.
in your slide, please?
The wheel? Yeah.
And the reason being, what I'm going to ask you next is, can you tell me today where we are using the bulk of our electricity in Oakville?
So we are a summer peaking utility, and correct me if I'm wrong, technical people. In the summer, our peak would be hit around 2 p.m. in the afternoon. So that's when your industrials are up in full running, and your air conditioning at offices is running full, and it's a hot August. And so that's when the system in Oakville hits its peak. In the winter, we match the winter cycle. We see a double peak in the winter, in the morning and in the afternoon, when customers are home, turning on their lights, preparing for their day, and then getting home at night at dinner, preparing their supper. Again, their lights are on.
Okay, just for the average person, okay. Can you give me off-peak, mid-peak, peak? Today, like 80% of our usage is in the peak hours, or 50%, or 40%? Like, I'm just trying to, so that people can relate to their own usage even more.
Yeah, I don't have that, I don't have our pattern exactly. I know the general pattern mirrors the province's situation. I don't have the percentages per, but I think we could probably pull that from we could pull that from the system.
I'd be interested in that information so we can get it out to the public, so they can see, like, it's going to be quite a concerted effort to move people from the peak and mid-peak, I think, to the off-peak, so.
Yeah,
But this is good. I must say, I haven't read a lot on it yet. I just knew it wasn't going to be good for us, and you've kind of confirmed that when I look at the 5.1 is the off-peak, so
yeah.
appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Dudek.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the presentation and being the bearer of such up news. You had mentioned the fact that they set it 2 times a year. What kind of lead time do they provide in terms of rolling out that information? Should they be changing from what we see for the existing summer and winter?
The OEB generally doesn't give us more than 3 weeks lead time for the change. We generally are notified in early to mid-April for the May 1st change. And then on the plus side, that is for consumption starting May 1st. So customers, depending on their billing cycle, would have a prorated bill for the first 60 days. So for example, you might be billed in the middle of that for consumption prior to May 1st and consumption after May 1st. Your prior to May 1st consumption is on the old rates. Your May 1st and forward consumption is on the new rates. So customers, although there's a short notice for us to implement the rates, customers will see the rate change over time in their bill.
I guess I'm kind of concerned that I've heard rumors from some people saying, well, these things can change and the person will continue using according to what they think the existing schedule is, and unbeknownst to them, they are now in the peak period. Mm-hmm. Is that correct?
Sure, that's possible. I mean, the actual wheels and the periods of peak don't change, or aren't expected to change because those are modeled on the province's pattern for peak power. It will be the rate within that pie piece that would change. So we provide customers with, obviously, a bill insert. We provide customers with information on our website, and we will also take an advertisement in the Beaver to notify customers of the change. You're welcome.
So there's good news for the Beaver there. Councillor Knoll.
Thank you. I guess your customer service staff are going to love this when they start getting disputes to say, oh, I didn't turn on my oven until 5:05. We've been billing me for 4 o'clock, so I can see that being a fun challenge. A couple of points. First of all, has the province, I'm not shooting the messenger here, I know you're just delivering the news from Queen's Park, but has the province, to the best of your knowledge, or any of the agencies involved, considered the implications on those who don't have the luxury of working, being out of their homes during off-peak periods? I mean, this is ideally set up for your typical nuclear family. Nobody's in the house during the day, they're not using energy, but those who are most vulnerable in our society, seniors, unemployed, those living in poverty, those are the folks who are home during the day and consuming energy. Has anybody considered the impact on them and made any sort of consideration as to how, or given any consideration of how those folks can be assisted? I mean, other than perhaps tripling or quadrupling the winter warmth program fund?
Well, there's a couple of, thank you for the question, there's a couple of thoughts there. Certainly, folks who are at home during the day still have the ability to shift certain activities to weekends. So laundry, for example, if you're using an electric dryer, there are certain patterns of behavior that can still change. So there are things that we're doing through our communication to address all of the opportunities for clients to change their behavior patterns. The province has, secondly, the province has recently mandated several low-income new initiatives through member agencies such as Oakville United Way, and so those are in place now and will be available to customers with lower income challenges to access through those member agencies.
Do you know if there's been any analysis done for some of those buildings? I mean, yes, you can shift your laundry consumption, but most of those folks aren't paying for their hydro for the laundry anyway. They're paying for air conditioning, cooking, their televisions, their lights, that sort of thing. Has there been any analysis done or any sort of work done in advance to sort of get a sense of what some of some of these communities are going to face, come, what is it, April 15th, I think you said?
April 15th, yep. Well, we
Because I
did...
know, sorry, and I'll say this one last statement and then I'll move on, but because I do know there's a lot of angst. There's a lot of these building operators, a lot of these community operators are quite concerned about what the future is going to hold, particularly for their clients who are individually metered.
I'm not aware of any specific studies the OEB has undertaken around buildings with seniors and low-income residents. However, I know in Oakville, back in 2006, we piloted 3 buildings. We individually metered the suites, and then we left one building alone, placed one building on time of use rates with minimal communication, and then placed a third building on time of use rates with a bombarding of communication and information. What we found, and the study's public, it's been reported to the OEB, what we found was that the average change in customer bill in those buildings at the time, peak and on-peak and off-peak were quite a bit different, was very minimal. It was less than $2 per month for those customers. However, the rates have changed, the tiers have changed, so we would have to review the data based under the new pricing to see if that would materially change the results of that study.
And last question is, you mentioned the fact that the only part of the rate on a very complicated rate structure, the only part that's actually affected is the commodity itself. What percentage of the total bill, so if somebody's watching this tonight, they're trying to do some math in their head, what percentage of the total bill is the commodity versus the distribution, et cetera?
So the distribution is just less than 25% of the bill. The commodity is the largest portion. My guess would be 60%, and then you've got some of the other various debt retirement and other charges.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Knoll. Councillor Khan, and then Councillor Giddings.
Thanks, Leslie. According to the numbers you gave us, can we assume that starting at April 15th, the weekend bills will automatically become 5.1%?
For those who are rolled out on April 15th, the weekend consumption will be at 5.1 cents per kilowatt hour, yes.
No matter whether winter or summer?
That's now till November 1st, and then November 1st, the OEB will come up with the winter pricing.
Back to that, what percent of our smart meters have already been installed?
It's well over 99%. We just have a very handful of hard-to-reach residential customers who might have an inside meter and we haven't been able to make an appointment yet, and we have a few commercials for which our supplier ran out of meters, so we're just waiting for meter stock.
We expect those to be installed before the April 15th?
Yes, we do.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Giddings?
Thank you. 2 questions. Overall, I understand that the OEB dictates the premise in terms of the hours. Will this be revenue neutral for Oakville Hydro overall?
Yes, it's revenue neutral in that all of the commodity dollars that we take in for our customers are passed directly back to the province. And then also neutral because the communication activities we're undertaking are also funded through a smart meter fund through the province as well.
Thank you. And my second question, we're going to see some big increases. It's a 50% increase from off-peak to peak time. With your billing systems that you have, is it possible this late in the cycle to say homeowner or family, effective April or May or when you get moved over, based on your consumption pattern this past billing period, your bill would be X, just to let them know, just to help your customer service people so that they have a good idea up front that it could be some very serious increases?
We have an online electronic system for our customers called eCare. And the customer can create an account and see their consumption pattern once we start billing and collecting on time of use. Right now, we only go to the customer's house and read once every 60 days manually. So we don't have a sense, except for when they've had their meter installed, we don't have any past history of when they use their power. So to the extent we've been testing and gathering, we're collecting that customer's time of use information now, and we'll be populating the eCare system with that data. So the customers can sign up for free for that service and log on to their own customer account and see the pattern that we've collected to date, and then make some, make some calculations and try to understand when they're using the power now.
Thank you, but it's going to be up to the homeowner to do those calculations through the e-care system?
The system does it. E-care is the viewer. The customer care agent can see the same information. So if the customer calls in, the customer agent will be able to see the same information that the homeowner can see through e-care.
So, Councillor Giddings, was that clear that there is no data on which to make that calculation?
Yeah, I understand. I'm just trying to, whatever we can do to let the homeowners know that start planning now, whether part of your consumer awareness is stickers for the washing machine saying save it till 9 or whatever, just to let people have the best chances they can to save some money.
Well, one of the communication vehicles would be stickers that look like that, so folks can stick it on their fridge or their dryer or their stove if they want to.
You're psychic. Councillor Bird.
You stole a little bit of my last comment. I got two questions. One, I was surprised to see this graph, because a number of years ago, Oakville, and I don't know if it's unique to Oakville, but we ran a very extensive public campaign. It was called Save It to 7. And now I see that if you do save it to 7, or you follow that pattern, which we tried to encourage people to, because that was, I guess, unique to Oakville, that we were trying to have people delay their washers and whatever it is to after 7. I now notice that that's either on peak or mid-peak all the time. The question is, how did our pattern change so much here in Oakville that 7 o'clock is now basically incorrect and a non-starter? We gave people wrong information. It should have been to now save it to after 9.
This is a provincial pattern, so I think the Oakville pattern would, I don't have it, I think that was one of the questions asked earlier, but I would suspect we mirror the province's.
Right. Well, that was my second question. What happened in Oakville that 7 o'clock no longer became beneficial to us now that we've gone to the new standard and people are, it's now moved to 9 o'clock. So you're saying this is a provincial standard, and we're going to live with that, notwithstanding unique to Oakville may be a different time frame.
Yeah, we're governed by the same OEB standards. 7 must have been a few years ago, because we haven't campaigned for a few years under that.
Oh, I remember it, and I remember who the chair was, I believe, Blair Taylor, quite frankly. He made a presentation to council and encouraged us, and it seemed such a simple thing to do. We did. I think we even had stickers on our buses and vehicles trying to encourage people to delay, if they can, hydro usage to help it out. Now I find that, so that's just me. The second thing on our hydro bill, it also indicated, and you kind of touched on it, there's a line called debt retirement. When is the projection of that dropping off, if ever?
Do you know, Rob?
No project. Like, there must be a limit to the debt and, I guess, projected time frame?
Yeah, I haven't looked recently, and so I wouldn't be able to answer that. I could certainly research it and respond.
Councillor, I can tell you that it's not really a question for Oakville Hydro. They have nothing to do with that. The next time we see our MPP, though, it'd be a good question for him.
Well, no, I was talking because it's a line item on the bill, and we brought up the issue of that the bill is a composite of not only your hydro, your water, your sewer, debt retirement, service delivery, and everything else. And the issue was the percentage of the bill, I guess, which will be hydro-related, electrical use, versus all the other things. And the one that we can't control is that debt retirement. And the reason I asked, I don't know if it's Mr. Flynn, I think he's also responded in the Beaver, you mentioned to that, what the use of the debt retirement. And we also had another member of the legislature show up suggesting that that is not necessarily going to the debt retirement. I'm just wondering, you sent out the bill, it must be based on something, and whether there is actually the amount of debt is going down or staying static.
We're guided by the province on the debt retirement costs to apply to each customer's bill, and we remit that amount monthly back to the OEFC. Yeah, we're the collector.
That's right. Second timers, Councillor Elger.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for all the information, but I got a little concerned when I asked you for rates, and you gave me the winter rates, which was 5.1, 8.1, and 9.9, and that's fine. But then Councillor Khan asked a question, and we got to, it's beginning on April 15th. And then, but I had also asked you a question about summer rates, and they're not available yet. So we're really going to be on the winter rates for the whole half of a month, and nobody has any idea what the May 1st rate is going to be. That is correct.
That is correct.
When do we expect we would have those rates? Like, if we were going to send something out to people in the community, it would be a lot more useful to them if they had timely numbers, I would think, and not to have them at this point, it's not very good.
We typically get them from the OEB in the first days of April, first week of April, and so we would turn around and communicate those as quickly as we got them to our customers through media, through our website, and through other information campaigns. But we don't receive them from the OEB until that point in time.
I realize they have no control, but it sure would make a lot more sense, in my opinion anyway, to start at May the 1st, so you wouldn't have this, maybe they're doing it on purpose to mix us up. Quick question on average household usage. You talk about 6.4 for the first 1,000 kilowatt hours, and then it goes to 7.4 afterwards. Average house in Oakville, do you have any idea what the ballpark kilowatt hours are on monthly usage?
Yeah, we typically average between 800 and 900 kilowatt hours per month broadly across Oakville residential.
I appreciate that, and it actually is very, very helpful, this information. Thanks.
Councillor Khan, second time.
Thanks, Leslie. Leslie, do you have an electronic brochure that you can circulate to members of council so that we can circulate that on an as-need basis to our constituents?
We do.
Thank you.
Councillor Knoll, second time.
Thank you. I'm sorry to push on this, because I think you're getting a common theme about the concern of how ratepayers are going to be impacted by this. Has there been any, and I asked modeling on how it's going to impact on low-income households. Has there been any modeling done on, because you have an average per household of 800 to 900 kilowatt hours. Presumably, you'd have some sort of sense, because your gauges and computers would tell you when the hydro is being consumed, and I assume you can break it down by residential user versus commercial user. Do you have a model or any sort of sense of what the average impact is going to be based on the rates that we know of now?
Yeah.
So if somebody were to say to you, okay, this is all wonderful, but how does this affect me? What would average Joe or Jane Oakville experience?
It would be very difficult to model an individual's behavior because of some of the factors you highlighted. When are you home? How many children do you have? How many televisions do you have? You know, when are you using your power? Our own internal study was the one that I mentioned, which was published with the OEB, which showed that people were consistently able to take their consumption from on-peak to mid-peak. They didn't necessarily make a wholesale shift to off-peak because that was inconvenient for them. And by doing the on-peak to mid-peak shift, they seemed to be able to mitigate the impact on their bill. So we haven't updated that study for the current pricing. I believe we still have that model and could quickly run that impact and use it as part of our communications. But though that's the only study that I'm aware of, is the one we conducted in 2006.
So based on that, your assumption then is that when you say mitigate, you're saying so basically the shifting of the average user in that study was able to essentially net out the impact based on their behaviors?
Within $2, yes.
Within $2. But of course, that doesn't take into account the new rate chart.
Oh, that's correct.
So whatever that mitigation is, that's only for the period of use or the time of use. That has no impact on the rate of, the midpoint, the mid-peak is 8.1 cents, which is still higher substantially than the highest rate that we're being charged right now.
That's correct.
So should we be, based on that, would it be fair to assume, Councillor Elgar just did the math for me, is it fair to assume that the average user is going to experience a 26% or 26.5% increase in energy consumption or energy cost?
If they used all their power at mid-peak and didn't have conservation, in their consumption, that's a potential outcome for those customers, yes. And that would be just on, again, on that piece of the bill, the half of the bill that is commodity.
And this is an election year.
If I may, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir, Mr. Lister.
I just want to provide a little bit of background. When the time of use rates were initially set, the premise was that across the province, if nobody changed their behaviors with the rates, that the actual cost would be neutral. And with 800 kilowatt hours as being the average residential consumption, and the way it worked out is if you actually consumed over the average, your bill actually would be less. And if you consumed less than the average, your bill would be higher. And the reason for that is for those people that have higher than average use, you have more discretionary load. A lot of your loads, like your pool pumps and your air conditioning, are used in the off-peak hours. So the way the math worked out is at the average 800 kilowatts an hour, you wouldn't see any change at all. If you happen to be more, your total bill would actually end up being less. If you were lower than that, your total bill would be more. It's just the initial rates that were set.
But just to be clear, that's based on just consumption. That's not based on the increase in the rate chart.
That was the original rate chart with the time of use rates that was set. Now, since then, the rate chart has been tweaked for some other economic reasons, unrelated to the original structure of that. That's why it starts to get confusing. But the original time of use rates were revenue neutral.
So I don't want to walk away from this with people having mixed messages. So based on that information, what were those model rates compared to what we're actually facing right now? Because I can't see revenue neutrality at a 26.5% increase in energy costs.
Well,
Unless I sell my
compare the apples
addition.
and apples, though, that the rates have gone up for the non-time of use users as well.
Yeah.
So I think if you compare what we're paying now on the regular price plan to the time of use, I'm not sure exactly, but I don't think that would be all that much different. What's changed is the rates have gone up for the RPP plus for the time of use right across. So again, the premise still holds that you go on time of use rates, and if you don't change your behavior too much, you're not going to pay all that much more. You have the opportunity now to mitigate how much you're going to pay, because you can now influence when you're going to be using the load.
Again, I'm not...
Okay, Councillor, we're not here to debate a provincial program with our local utility whose job it is to communicate the news. And Councillor Khan, a third round is beyond the limits of our rules, and I think we've descended into debate by proxy with the province here. So I'd like to thank Oakville Hydro for being here tonight, and I would ask you to consider the rest of council and perhaps stand down. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, President Lister. Council, the recommendation before you is that Oakville Hydro Corporation, through its subsidiary, Energy Services, be authorized to participate in the proposed limited partnership structure to create the Halton Utilities Group, and that the future business activities of the group will continue to be subject to the appropriate shareholder and board approval as required. I need a mover and a seconder. Councillor Elgar and Councillor Knoll, all in favor? Opposed? That is adopted. That brings us to your confidential discussion item, a proposed and pending acquisition or disposition of land. And how do you wish to proceed? Councillor Elgar moves it. Is there a seconder? Councillor Grant, thank you. All in favor? Opposed? That is carried. You have your information items circulated in advance. You now arrive in the agenda to the new business section, where we welcome notices of motion or emergency congratulatory or condolence remarks. Thank you. We now come to regional reports and question period regarding town boards and advisory committees. Thank you. And requests for reports. We burned ourselves out in previous meetings on those. All right. Then we need a mover and seconder to pass the confirmatory bylaw. Councillor Johnson and Councillor Robinson, all in favor? Opposed? That is adopted. And that completes our agenda. Thank you for your time and attention, and we are adjourned.